everyone, so we are back for the next part of the Durango hat. This section we're going to talk about how we finish off the hat. I have stitched my hat using this very colorful yarn, just a worsted weight yarn in a color that my daughter would like. I have finished all of the single crochet. You can see it's quite stretchy because of the way the ribbing is stitched. You would have been stitching it back and forth in this direction. Okay, but the hat actually will go this way once we sew our ends together to create the round for your hat. So for this part of the video, or for this part of the project, you are going to need a ruler or a measuring tape of some sort. You will need a yarn needle, a pair of scissors, and you will also need a piece of sturdy cardboard that you can cut out of, say, a cereal box or a pizza box, something of that sort, to make your pom-pom. And I'll show you that part when we get there. So for now, what you're going to use your measuring tape for is you want to measure your project from end to end. So not this way, not the width across. It's going to be the length of the project. So from one end all the way to the end that you finished stitching. As you can see, there's my yarn hanging out here. This should be a total of 19 inches long, approximately. If your head is very small, you may want to crochet shorter. You may want to only go, say, to, 16, 17, 18 inches. But for a standard, usually adult, you're approximately, give or take, 19 inches around. Again, this will stretch to accommodate a little bit larger. And if it's a little bit smaller, you might be better off just, cutting out a row or two here on the end. So when you get to the end of your project, because this would have been the end that my crochet hook was in. So there you go, I've gotten to the end of the round. You're just going to pull out your crochet hook and you're going to leave a nice long tail. Because we're actually going to use this yarn to sew up your project. So just leave a really nice long tail and cut your yarn. And then right here on the end, I'm actually going to pull that yarn through. Okay, so that finishes off that little stitch there. So what we're going to do now is you're going to match up both ends of your hat, like so. So that, let's see if I can get this to focus well, so that you can see the V's on the top of your last row you stitched, and you can also see these little V's that are on the bottom of your beginning chain. Okay, because these would be technically, see how they look like? This is the stitch, and then you have this little V on top. So you're just going to line those two up together. Okay, now I'm right-handed, so I'm actually going to turn this around so I can sew from this end. It'll make it a little bit easier for me. So I'm just going to thread my yarn needle. I probably cut this tail a little too long, to be honest with you, but here we go. So I've threaded the yarn needle, and what you're going to do is you're going to go through the very outside edge of this V right here. And that's going to bring those two ends together. Then you're going to come over the top, go through that stitch, and go back through that first stitch again, just to secure the end of your project, like so. Okay. Now what I tend to do when I sew my pieces together, sometimes I crochet them together, but in this instance I'm going to sew them together. I'm going to go through, oh, I'm not in frame, am I? It's hard to do this with the camera. I'm going to go through the 2 V's of the next stitch, the top of the next stitch, and then I'm going to go through the 2 V's at the top of the next chain stitch. And make sure this loop goes over the top like that. Then I'm going to come back through those 2. So you can see I'm going underneath the 2 chains and underneath the V of the next stitch. Then I will go back through this way. And then I will come back this way. So I'm creating a seam, which you really can't see because, of course, it's going to be hidden in the ribbing of this hat. So we're just going to do this all the way underneath the 2 chain loops and then underneath the stitched loops on this side. Back through these loops and then in through these loops. Okay, we're going to do this all the way up the entire hat till we get to the other end. Now the reason you may ask why I'm going back and forth here instead of going through and then having my yarn go over and go through the same way again. For example, see how my yarn is coming out on this side? If I were to go back through this way and then my yarn comes over the top. The reason I don't like to do that is because if you're using a different color like I am here, where now my variegated yarn is blue against this, you can, I did a couple stitches here just to show you, you can actually see the blue looping over. So you get this wrapped effect. Whereas weaving it in and out, it comes in and out of here and it just looks like it becomes part of the stitch. You can't really tell. You can see there where I went through with the blue, but it's on top of this loop. It just looks like it's part of the construction of the hat. It doesn't look like where it's been sewn. So that's why I weave my stitches, my sewing stitches back and forth instead of continually, you know, pulling my yarn through this way and then going back over and doing it again. I choose to go back and forth instead. But again, it's entirely up to you. If you're using all the same color, if your hat is all one color, it probably won't make that much of a difference because you probably won't be able to tell where the seam is anyway in the ribs once the hat is together. So I'll meet you at the end. So here I am at the end. I'm going to come through this last stitch and then I am actually going to go over the top and come through it again just to make it a little more secure there on the end and pull that nice and snug and nice and tight. And then what I'm going to do is I'm going to start weaving this end up through the hat through these stitches. Like so. And you can see this is the tail, this is your starting tail from your chain. We're going to weave that in again in a moment. We're just going to deal with the end of the hat for now. So we're just going to weave this up through the back side of some of these stitches to bury it. I'm actually going to go back through one of the stitches here because I do not want this coming apart where I've sewn it up. And this is going to be the cuff of the hat. Actually, this might be the top of the hat. I think this will be the top of the hat. So it's not really going to matter because you won't see it once it's been gathered up anyway. And there. So now that I've gotten that end woven in and this is not going to come apart, just going to snip that off. And I am going to not worry about this little tail for a moment. I still have quite a length of yarn on my needle. And now we're going to sew the end of the hat together. This is the little tricky part. So you're going to anchor this stitch. You're going to anchor your yarn wherever you want. I'm going to start here where the other tail is. I'm just going to go through a couple of pieces of yarn there to anchor this piece, like so. Actually, I may want that left a little bit longer. So just give me a moment here. I want this end left a little longer. There you go. And now I'm just going to go through. You see how these kind of bump up because of the ridge that's been created? We're going to go through each of those ridges. Just go through them like that. And we're just going to go through. See how the yarn is left open? And we're going to go through the next one, the next stitch, the next top of the bump, like so, through the next one. See how my yarn is coming across here? We're going to do that all the way around, and then we're going to pull this tight. And that's what's going to cinch in the top of the hat. So just go all the way around on the top of every one of these little bumps that's sticking up here. Okay. And you don't have to be too particular about, you know, if you take up an extra piece of yarn or it doesn't matter. You are never going to see this. It's going to be hidden underneath the pom-pom. Okay. So I'm going to go all the way around and I'll meet you back at the beginning. I'm hoping this is clear because the sun is shining in here. And I don't know how well you can see this, but. So we're back at the beginning. Here's our tail. This is the tail from the chain. It's still hanging out here, but this is the tail from where we started. And I'm actually going to pull this out. Instead of having that looped around there like that, I'm going to pull that out of there, just so it's hanging loose. So now, this piece of yarn, our last piece of yarn, we're going to go, I just went through this last bump here, and we have this one. Now we're going to pull these tight, okay? And take my yarn needle off, and I'm going to pull both of those strings. You see how it just pulls the hat in like one big lump? Then what we're going to do is we're just going to put our fingers in the opening. Okay. Again, this is the tail from the beginning chain. We can actually tuck that inside if you want to. We're just going to pull, pull, pull. And we're going to move this around and cinch this in as tight, as tight, as tight as we can get it. Now you're not going to get it perfectly tight. It's still going to be a hole big enough that you can probably put your finger in there. But we're going to cinch it in as tight as we possibly can. The fact that there's still a little bit of a gap there is not a big deal because that's where your pom-pom is going, okay? So when you get this pulled as tight as you possibly can get it, you're going to use all your stitching strength. So once that's as tight as you can possibly get it, you're going to tie a knot, okay? Bear with me here. I'm just going to tie a knot. I'm trying to do this and still hold it tight. Okay, so we're going to pull this tight again and pull, 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 and then tie. Well, I'm keeping the tension on there. This part's a little tricky because you got to keep the tension on there. There we go. Oh, my phone's ringing. So now I've got a knot tied. I'm just going to tie that again. And usually I don't put knots in my work, but you know, it's the top of a hat and no one's ever going to see it and you're not going to feel it and you're not going to know it's there. So there's the top of my hat, and you can see I can barely stick a finger in there, but it's all cinched up really well. Okay, so these tails we're going to poke down inside and we will sew those in after, but right now we're going to make our pom-pom. So there is our hat. So far so good. Okay, cinched top, here's your cuff, you just flip that up, away you go. Okay, so far so good. Inside feels well. Okay, you can see how the top looks. It's just all pleated because it's been all pulled in together. Okay, so now let's do our pom-pom. So for the pom-pom, you're going to want a piece of cardboard. Okay, this is just a piece of regular corrugated cardboard. You could use the side of a cereal box, a cookie bag, whatever you have. Okay, and the width of this is going to dictate how tall your pom-pom is. So I want mine fairly fluffy because I want it like the one I used on my hat. I'll just quickly grab that here. Here we go. And you can see it's fairly fluffy, but if I were to gather it all up and hold it up, you can see that, you know, it's about that tall or a little taller. So this piece of cardboard that I've cut is almost 2 inches wide, a little less than, well, yeah, it's about 2 inches wide, or it's little less than 5 centimeters. Okay, so I'm going to get a piece of yarn. I'm going to use this colored piece of yarn, and I'm just going to cut that. Doesn't matter how long it is, as long as it's it has to be longer than your piece of cardboard you're using. Okay, so I'm going to put a little slit on this end and a little slit on this end, and that's because I'm going to hook that yarn in there. We're going to wrap our pom-pom around this, and this is what I'm going to use to tie it together with after. Okay, now I'm going to make my pom-pom using 2 colors of yarn. I'm going to mix the same color I used for the hat, which is a variegated yarn, along with white, so that I can get 2 colors in the pom-pom, because I think the white will stand out nice with the bright colors in the hat. And just like I did this one, I used 2 colors for this one. So all you're going to do is you're going to hold your yarn with your thumb, and you're just going to wrap it around. And you're just going to wrap and wrap and wrap and wrap fairly tightly. Okay, and you're going to keep wrapping. Pull out my yarn here. I'm going to get these tangled in a minute. You're just going to keep wrapping until this is really, really nice and thick. So I'll meet you back here in a few minutes. I have wrapped a bunch of yarn all around this. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to take that out of there. And I'm going to do the same thing on this side, take that out of there, and I'm going to pull that up to the top here, the edge of my cardboard. and I am going to tie a knot. Okay, as tight as I can possibly get it. We're going to cinch in that yarn as best as we can. Okay, pull, pull, pull. And the tighter we can cinch that in, the better. Put my finger on there. Try and keep the tension on it so I can get a knot there. There we go. We're going to pull that tight, 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 tight. Okay, it's not too bad. Could be a little tighter. Yeah, it could be a little tighter. Okay, we're going to try that again. I'm going to get another piece of yarn. And I'm actually going to use my darning needle. It's great that you get to see my mistakes because then you'll figure out how to fix them. So I'm just going to put my darning needle right through underneath with this other yarn attached. There we go. So I can pull this through. There we go. And we'll try tying another knot. I'm not worried about these pieces of yarn hanging out here because they'll just become part of the pom-pom. Okay. So we're going to tie another knot here. See if we can get this one a little tighter. Well, yeah. There we go. Okay. So now that we have that done, after all of that, what you're going to do is you're going to hold your knot on this end, and you're going to get your scissors underneath here on the opposite side of your cardboard, and you're just going to start cutting these strands. Okay, little bit by little bit. And if you have scissors sharper than mine, you should be able to get through here fairly easily. But you're just going to cut right along that cardboard edge. There we go. Did we get them all? Oh, a few strands left. Pull out your cardboard. These were your ends. We'll just flop that together, and there you go. Voila. There is your pom-pom. Now, if your pom-pom doesn't look perfectly even, don't worry about it. Don't sweat the small stuff, as my grandmother would say. Now that I have the cardboard out, you can see how there's a bit of give there. You can actually tie these two ends together if you wanted to, just to cinch that in a little bit more. It doesn't matter because this is actually going to be against that hole in the hat, and you won't see it, right? There we go. Cinch that in a little bit better. Tie another knot there. There we go. Ta-da! So there you go. There's your pom-pom. Now, if you think some of this is a little too long or a little too short or what have you, there's an easy way for you to fix that. You can fluff it up, and then you can just go around and you can trim off, you know, some of these little bits that are poking down too long for your liking or whatever. But I don't like to do that really until it's on the hat, okay? Because once this is sitting up against the hat, you know, it's gonna be nice and full and fluffy anyway. So let's show you. Oops, I didn't mean to bump the camera there. Let's see, there we go. So let's see how we're going to attach this to the hat. What we're going to do, Remember that little hole at the top? Way up here. Okay, first thing we're going to do is we're going to get these strings down inside that hole. Okay, so I'm just going to pull these down. So those strings are now, if you can see, coming in through the end of my hat. Okay. We're going to do the same thing with the strings that you tied the pom-pom together with. Only instead of putting them down through the hole, we're going to use our sewing needle and we're going to put them down through either side. Oops, I'm not in the camera. Instead of putting them down through the hole, we're going to put them down through just either side. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to take 2 of these strings, put them on my yarn needle, okay, and put my yarn needle down through just the very edge. You can see my finger in here. I'm going to put it down through the very edge of the hat there. And I'm just going to pull those strings down inside the hat. Okay, so the pom-pom is now down on that side. You can see it in here a little bit maybe. And I'm going to pull those off of my needle. Okay, I'm holding on to them so the pom-pom doesn't come off. I have my other hand up inside the hat. I'm going to go around to the other side. Here's the other strings, okay? You can see where they're attached there. Okay, so I'm going to take these 2 strings and I'm going to go down just on the other side. So again, we're going to thread the needle. Now, you should only have 1 string if you were smart enough and tie your knot tight, unlike myself. So again, I'm reaching up inside the hat with my left hand. I'm grabbing onto those strings from the other side of the pom-pom so they don't pull out. And you can see where these strings, this is the hole of the hat right here. Let me see if I can focus in on this a little better. You can see right here are the 2 strings down inside the hat. So right across from that, right here, this is where I'm going to go down on this side of the hat. And I'm actually going to pull those down on this side. Okay, and I'll flip the hat inside out so you can see. All right. I'm going to pull those out there. So now I have these ones on one side and these ones on the other side, and I'm just going to tie them together inside the hat. I'm just going to make a knot, and I'm going to pull the knot tight because that's going to cinch that pom-pom down to the hat. Okay, you can triple tie it if you want in a knot. All right, now that I've got it tied and I've triple tied it, I basically just snip off those ends. I don't bother to weave those in. You can if you want, but to me it's a waste of time. That little bit of yarn hanging out there at the top of the inside of the hat is not going to affect anybody. Now, these yarns, these are the ones that we use to tie up the hat. You can weave these in. It'll only take a second to do that. And what I do is I just thread them through my needle, and you just weave them in around the top, picking up a few stitches here, picking up a few stitches there. Just pull them through like so. So you're just sewing them in through a few stitches at the top of the hat, weaving them in just so that they don't come loose and they don't come out. Okay? Same thing, snip that off. And I'll do the same thing with these 2. Let me thread my needle here. And then we are done. So these ones, same thing. I'm just going to do these both at the same time. Weave them in, la la la, weave them in. I'll go around Weave them in on this side a little more. And I'm not going all the way up through the hat. I'm just catching the stitches on the inside of the hat. Okay? Because you don't want to go up through and have these poking out the top. And then I'm just going to snip those off. Okay, so that's what the inside of the hat looks like. And this is what the outside of the hat looks like with our lovely pom-pom. And I think it looks fine. So there you have it. There is your Durango hat, all done, with a nice fluffy pom-pom on top. So if you have any questions, leave them in the comment section down below. I'll do my best to answer them as best I can. And I hope you enjoyed this project. The next project I'm going to do is another slouch hat. You can see I've got, look, a little piece came out there. The next one I'm going to do is a little slouch hat, and that one doesn't have any of this sewing requirements at the end. I'm just going to go around and trim a couple of these pom-pom pieces randomly. And I'm not the type who cares if the pom-pom is perfect. As long as it looks like a pom-pom, I'm good to go. All right, I hope you enjoyed it. I am going to be doing the slouch hat next, and the slouch beanie is easy beginner project, and there is no sewing required. So the only thing you have to sew in is your very end piece of yarn when you finish it at the end. That's it. You don't need to sew it up like this one. So I hope you join me, and we'll see you then. Thanks for watching. And just so you can see what the hat is like once it's on, I don't think it looks too bad. It's got a really nice thick band, so it's going to be super warm in the winter, right? And there's our pom-pom on top. Not too shabby. Alrighty guys, hope you enjoyed this, and don't forget to use the hashtag Pam's Crafty Corner Cal if you're going to stitch this project and upload pictures to Instagram, so I can follow along and see what projects you've created.